Welcome back to another Lazy Shell tutorial video. Today we're talking about the event script editor. Personally, this is the editor I enjoy the most. Event scripts are where everything you've edited really comes together. This is how you make the game do stuff. That said, with great power comes great responsibility. There are a lot of commands to learn. Let's start with the basics of how to add in commands. First, you select a category from this drop-down on the right. Then you select the command you want to use. Some commands have additional properties to edit, but some don't. If there are properties to edit, make sure you edit them the way you need to. Then you click Insert Command, and the command appears in the command window on the left. If you make a mistake in editing that command's properties, you can double-click on it, change the properties in this property area, click Apply Changes, and there you go, it's been fixed. If you check these boxes next to commands, you can use these buttons down at the bottom to move them, copy and paste them, or delete them. There are other buttons to undo and redo changes that have been made as well. This button down here also lets you edit the command. It's the same thing as if you just double-click on the command itself. And these two commands, this isn't relevant to action scripts, but in event scripts, you'll see that some commands are nested within other commands. You can use these pluses and minuses to collapse or expand those nested commands. And then right next to that, the editor tells you how much free space you have to work with. If this gets to 0, you'll have to delete some commands to make room for more. Similar to dialogues, event scripts are broken down into different sections. Each section has its own pool of byte space to work with. That way, if you run out of space in one section, and you really don't want to delete any more events, you can use events in a different section. Sections do matter for a couple of commands, but we'll talk about those when we get to them. For now, just know that these different sections are a thing. Action scripts, however, don't have this luxury. There is only one section of action scripts to work with. From this drop-down, you can see we can edit two different things, event scripts and action scripts. While event scripts control just about everything in the overworld, action scripts are essentially a more specific type of event script. Action scripts are used to control the movement of things like NPCs, the screen, and even Mario himself. Let's start with action scripts. Counting the first action script, number 0, there are 1024 action scripts available. You'll see action scripts assigned to NPCs in the levels editor. This makes the NPC perform whatever the action script tells it to do. You'll also see action scripts used within event scripts. It's important to note that just about anything you can do with action scripts can also be done using event scripts. Action scripts are best used for actions that will be used repeatedly throughout your game. Stuff like the behavior of monsters, whether it chases the player or avoids them, the movement of random NPCs in towns, or the way Mario spins in place and then does his signature peace sign move, which is done when you get a new ally. That way, in your event scripts, you don't have to list out all the commands anytime you want those actions to be done. You can just use one command that tells the NPC, do action number whatever. Going along with that, there may be some action scripts in the original game that you can reuse in yours, so be considerate about which action script you overwrite. I've said it before, but just because something exists to change doesn't mean you have to change it. Now let's get into the commands. If you click on this drop-down, you can see the different categories of commands. Let's start with the first one, properties. These let you change various properties of the NPC performing this action script. These first two are fairly simple. Visibility on and off. You can probably guess, but this makes the NPC appear or disappear. Sequence playback on and off. When an NPC exists in a level, it may have a sprite sequence assigned to it via an action script. You can use these commands to tell it to play the sequence or stop playing the sequence. Sequence looping on and off works similarly. Some NPCs will be set to loop their sequences indefinitely. You can tell them to stop looping it or to start. Fixed F coordinate means fixed facing coordinate. Turning this on locks in the direction the NPC faces. Solidity bits. These are properties that affect an NPC's solidity. Things like, can Mario walk through them? Or are they solid? Can they walk through walls? Etc. Choosing solidity bits equals lets you choose which one of these properties applies to that NPC. The ones that just say bit number whatever are unknown bits. We don't know what those do. Set bits and clear bits lets you choose which specific solidity properties you want to turn on and off. There's some overlap between these set and clear bit commands and the bits equals command. VRAM priority. The Super Nintendo only has so much processing power. Basically, you use this command to tell the game whether or not to use some of that processing power on whoever is using this action script. You can use numbers 0 through 3. In practice, you'll only see 0 or 3 used. 0 is don't prioritize this, 3 is make this top priority. Movement set bits. Very similar to the solidity bits command, this lets you apply specific solidity properties for when the NPC is moving. If in air, jump to. If the NPC doing the action is in midair, it'll jump to whatever address you put here. In practice, you'll often see this paired with a command immediately above it, saying pause script for 1 frame, and then this command will jump to that command. Those two commands put together puts a pause on the entire script until the NPC is no longer in air. Reset properties. This resets things like solidity, sequence playback and looping, floating, what direction they're facing, whether it's fixed or not, etc., to whatever they were before the action script started. Shadow on and off. You can control whether or not the NPC casts a shadow. Floating on and off. You can change whether or not the NPC floats when they're midair. You can change whether or not the NPC floats when they're in midair, or if they fall down. Priority equals. This is similar to the VRAM priority command we saw earlier. Levels are made of different layers. Priority determines if the NPC is in front of or behind those layers. Just like with VRAM priority, you can use 0 through 3 for these values, but in practice, you'll usually only see 0 or 3 used. 0 means put this NPC behind everything, while 3 means put them in front of everything. On to the next category in the dropdown, we have palette. Palettes are groups of 16 colors. Each sprite uses one palette at a time to determine its color scheme. You can use these palette commands to change the palette a given sprite is using to a different palette stored in memory. Which palettes are loaded into memory depends on the current level and the sprites within that level. You can use this row equals command to specify which of those rows you want the current sprite to use. Row plus equals takes whatever the current palette row the sprite is using and advances up the list. The number entered here is how many rows it advances. Row plus equals 1 is similar, but instead of choosing the number of rows to advance, it advances by 1. Next category is sequence/speed. Animation sequence references animations from the sprites editor. Remember that action scripts are typically used by NPCs in levels. Every NPC has a sprite number in the sprites editor. Sprite plus equals 0 uses that sprite number. Plus equals 1 would use the sprite right after, and so on. You'll typically only use something besides 0 if that NPC has multiple sprites within the sprites editor. For example, ally characters. Mario alone has 7 sprites within the sprites editor. Mario's default sprite number is 0 when he's moving around the overworld. If you wanted Mario to do his surprised animation, you would need to use sprite plus equals 3 to get there. Similarly, sequence number refers to the sprite's sequences in the sprites editor. Down to these boxes, you can use read as mold if you want the sprite to use one of its molds, a still image, rather than a sequence. Looping off will make it so the animation only plays once and then stops. Read as sequence seems to be redundant, as the default is to read it as a sequence in the first place. In the original game, this box is checked anytime read as mold isn't checked. But again, treating it as a sequence is the default treatment, so checking this box doesn't seem to be necessary. Mirror sprite will flip the sequence or mold along its vertical axis, making a mirror image. Walking sequence speed lets you choose how fast the sprite moves. These boxes let you choose whether you want the change in speed to apply to how fast the sprite walks or moves from point A to point B, or how fast its animation plays, or both. This drop-down lets you choose how fast or slow you want it to go. If object A and B are so many steps apart, this tells the game if this sprite and some other object are within a certain distance of each other, jump to this address. Let's break this one down a bit. Object B is whatever sprite is currently using this action script. Object A is whatever you choose from this drop-down menu. This box here is an unknown parameter you can set. However, when this command is used in the original game, you'll see this box is just about always 0. Hence why this line says, usually set to 0. I suggest leaving it there. This box specifies the distance in tiles the object must have between them for this command to apply. This amount is measured in isometric tiles. You can get a sense of how big a tile is using the levels editor. For example, take a look at this. These two toads are one tile apart. The final part of this command says, if these two objects are within that distance, go to whatever code is at this address. Every address in ActionScripts starts with the same first two numbers, 21. So when jumping to a new address, the only digits that are relevant are the last 4 digits. This command only cares about horizontal distance between the two objects. It doesn't factor in if one might be higher up than the other or jumping. The similar command right below it is the same command as above, but with the added caveat that the two objects must be at the same height. These two commands will create a new NPC packet at specific coordinates. NPC packets are specific sprites that can be summoned and used in a level, even if that sprite is not listed in the available NPCs for that level. These are things like stars and flowers you find in chests, explosions, coins, etc. You can select which packet you want to use. The packets themselves can be edited in the sprites editor. If, for whatever reason, the game can't load in the packet, you can specify an address you want the game to jump to. The difference between these two commands is that the first one lets you choose where the packet spawns based on an object of your choosing. The second command will make the packet appear at the coordinates of whatever object is stored at memory address 7010-15. There's an event script command that lets you choose an object whose coordinate data you want to store to this memory address. ActionScript equals lets you specify an action script you want the sprite to use. Yes, you can use action scripts to tell sprites to use other action scripts. On to animation routines. These are a little odd. These tell NPCs to do specific animation routines. As for what those specific routines are, that's tough to say. You can't edit these routines, so you can only figure out what they do by telling NPCs to do them and seeing what they do. I can tell you that routine 28 is used by save points, so this routine is for slowly oscillating up and down. The bees in Bean Valley use all 3 of these. What's more, routine 26 has additional information that is supposed to go along with it. If you insert the command, you'll see this string of digits after it. However, if you click on this command, you can see that there are no additional properties to edit. You have no way of editing this string of digits. And frankly, I don't know what this string of digits does. I can tell you that the bees in Bean Valley use this command with a specific string of digits afterward, but what purpose it serves is anybody's guess. At the end of the day, whatever these routines are telling NPCs to do can be replicated by using other commands, so don't feel too bad if you can't figure out how to use these. Next, we have walk one step. This is a pretty easy one. All of these commands make the NPC walk one step in a specific direction. One step is one isometric tile. Remember those commands for doing something when two objects are certain steps apart? These steps are measured the same way. You have commands to move one step in the cardinal and intercardinal directions, a command to make the NPC walk one step in whatever direction they're currently facing, and commands to make the NPC move up or down one step. Walk X steps is pretty similar to the walk one step commands. The difference is you can choose the number of steps, except these few commands which specify 20 steps. I don't know what's significant about 20, you'll have to ask the directors for that. There are a couple of additional commands. These commands make the NPC jump, with or without the jump sound effect. This isn't measured in steps the same way the other commands are. I don't know what it's measured in, but I can tell you that if you want the NPC to jump about the same height Mario can jump, you'll want to use around 90. Anything below around 30, and you might not even notice the NPC is jumping. Walk X pixel commands are the same as the walk X step commands, except it's measured in pixels. Perfect for very slight and precise movements. Face direction commands are also pretty straightforward. You use these commands to make the NPC face particular directions, including toward Mario. It should be noted that the NPC needs to have a mold or sequence where they face the direction you command them to face. For example, just about every NPC except Mario doesn't have molds where they face the 4 compass directions. So commanding them to face those directions will have them use some other mold, which likely won't look right. Move to commands will make the NPC move. You can specify if you want them to move a certain amount of steps, or pixels, or if you want them to move to specific coordinates. Here are some key points. Walking makes the NPC walk to the destination specified, as opposed to transfer, which essentially teleports the NPC to their destination. So basically, when moving from point A to point B, walking lets you see the movement, while transfer is instantaneous. Then there's bounce, which makes the NPC hop repeatedly toward the destination. You can specify the height of the bounces. You can also make things move to the same location as an object of your choosing, or to a location stored in memory. There is a command to change what's in this memory address under event commands. Audio commands let you change the music and sound effects playing. We touched on the particulars of system audio in the audio editor, but these commands let you choose songs to play, what volume to play them at, what sound effects to play, and to stop if necessary. Memory commands. We talked about the idea of memory in the animation scripts video, but we'll go over it a bit again. Memory, as the name implies, is how the game remembers and keeps track of stuff. In general, there are 2 types of memory. These commands that start with memory 704x are typically for more permanent types of things you want the game to remember. For example, if you wanted the game to remember that you defeated a boss, have the event script that contains that boss fight have a command in it to set one of these bits. Then perhaps in a town or something, you would have an event script that says, if that memory bit has been set, because we beat that boss, play a happy song instead of a our town is under attack type song. You can't save a number to these memories. It's basically like a light switch. There are 2 positions, on or off. Memory bits are saved when the player saves their game. These other commands, like memory 7xxx or 700C are usually for more temporary things. These are things the game typically needs to check right now, but then can immediately forget them once the check has been made. For example, if you're at an inn, there are commands to store the player's current coin count to memory 7000. Then there's a check to make sure memory 7000 is at least a certain amount. If it is, the player can stay at the inn. After that check is done, the game doesn't need to keep that coin price in memory anymore until the player decides to talk to the innkeeper again and the event runs again. Many memory addresses under 7xxx are cleared or utilized in unexpected ways throughout the game. So if you try to store a certain number to that address, it may get erased without you knowing how. However, some memory addresses are not. There's not an easy way of checking which ones are changed frequently and which ones are untouched without some trial and error. You're just going to have to experiment there. Not only do these commands let you store certain amounts to memory, but you can also compare them to certain numbers, add or subtract from them, check if they are set or not, check what level the player is in, where certain objects are, and more. You can do a lot with these commands. Even if you only know how a few of them work, they can still be quite powerful. Jumping down to Jump To. Jump To address advances the script to whatever command is at that address. Jump To subroutine is similar. The key difference is that with Jump To subroutine, once you hit a return Q command, the script will jump back to whatever command is listed immediately after the Jump To subroutine command. Whereas with Jump To address, the action script will end once you hit a return Q command. Loop start and end lets you repeat commands multiple times. Loop start lets you specify how many loops you want to do. Loop end marks the end of the section of commands you want repeated. Object memory. The bad news is that these commands seem to be broken in Yakobom's version of Lazy Shell. Even when using a fresh ROM, the editor crashes anytime I try to click on object memory. However, you can still open this up in older versions of Lazy Shell. There are commands to remove objects from levels, remove event triggers, and adjust object memory bits, but ultimately all of these commands can be mimicked using other commands, so there's no great loss. Next we have pause script commands. There are only two of them. The first one lets you pause for up to 256 frames, while the second one lets you pause for up to 65,536 frames. Fun fact, assuming the Super Nintendo holds steady at its supposed frame rate of 60 frames per second, 65,536 frames is about 18 minutes. Last, we have return commands. We touched on this a bit already, but if an event script or action script calls another action script as a subroutine, return Q will send the game back to the command that comes right after that command, telling the game to jump to this subroutine. If return all is used, that tells the game, we're done reading all scripts for now until we encounter a new one. And that's all there is for action scripts. Some of these are tough to understand, but they're fun to use once you know how to. Give them a try, do some experimenting, and have some fun. That's what ROM hacking is all about. If you like these videos and you want to see more, or if you just want to support the channel, please consider subscribing. Like I said, I know event scripts can be kind of a doozy, so if there's a particular event you're having trouble with, something you want to learn how to do, let me know and I'll do what I can for you. Thanks, and I'll see you next time.